That's interesting little tidbits about me. I have kids, which is not unusual, but I have unusual kids is the thing. Huh? We all know that, right? So awesome. So I was asked to convey that if you have check your cell phone to see if it's on and then turn that off. And that it would be nice if people kind of stay in during the sessions so that it's not too much movement and causes a little distraction. So I was asked to do that. Okay, so I loved Jean's talk. It makes me kind of go back to like I wanted to wear my like hippie outfit, so that I kind of got this going. Those days were wonderful days. They were simple. And so many of those young people that were dying of drug overdoses chose Jesus, and they sat at the feet of what at that time was a bunch of just hippies and people that didn't know anything about the Lord really. And they took drugs and they were messed up. And they sat there and then became, as time went on, pastors and teachers of God's word. And you look at them and it's like, wow, this is, you see who they are. But where they came was such humble beginnings. And we need a revival in our time because there's so many kids out there. The kids that came in those days, they were really needy. They had checked out, they were on drugs, and many were dying, just like what we see today. And why not a revival now in our time? And we'd be the old timers, not everybody in this room, but some people I know would be like one of the old timers that could come alongside these kids and just love on them like you just want to when you see that they come to the Lord. So anyway, so my lesson today, I had a couple of titles. You said you're a title person. Jean said that, I think. I love titles. I get titles and then I write a thing about it. I'll get a title and then I'll dedicate. I'm like, okay, I got to write something. And then I put myself through hours of writing and editing because that title stuck to me like a hook in a fish's mouth. And so I have two titles for my message today. And I started out, it's called The Messy Middle, which is really a good, it has, you'll see why it's like that, but the messy middle. We're in the messy middle right now between the time that, the Bible days that we read about where we discover that Jesus came, even the Old Testament, and now we're waiting for Jesus to come back. And we're looking around and we're saying, this is so close. Read all the signs of the times, and so many of them have passed. I don't think there's anything left except the messy middle. And it's difficult to be in the messy middle. It's that long road trip that it's like, we still have, 500 miles left to go out of the 1,500 we're going to go. It's the messy middle. It's the middle when you have little ones and you're like, oh, I just don't have a life and I'm pouring into them, and then they grow up. It's the messy middle when you're a middle-aged woman, which I think I'm not even that still. I think every time I thought I was, getting a sort of a tagline or something, I realized I was already past that time. I don't know if that ever happened. You're like, wow, I'm approaching middle age. Like, let's get real here because how old are you? Look at your driver's license. The number is bigger than it used to be, and it's kind of shocking to me. My husband and I adopted identical twin girls 12 years ago, and I can't believe they're 12. So they're in 7th grade, and now we are once again, because we had other kids, in that place where we've got this beginning teenage kind of stuff, and I'm thinking, what have you done with my kids? They have gone away, and they've got these other guys that are now back. So we are in the middle of those challenges. How to keep that joy going that we had when they were young, and they believed everything we said, and they did what we said most of the time. And now they're getting independent. How do we raise those kids? How do we live that life so that we can still maintain, keep them safe and maintain our sanity and continue to teach them about the Lord and about how to live in these last days. The other title that I came up with is, Are We There Yet? So if we've all taken trips like the kids are going, are we there yet? And I sometimes find myself feeling that way because it is the long haul in the middle that, and some people call it the dash. Do you know remember how they used that phrase kind of a lot? And they said, what are you going to do? So here you are living your life, and now you're in the dash between there and then the time you die. We are in the dash if we're sitting here and we have a pulse. We're still in the dash. And it could be sooner than we think, because if Jesus returns, it'll be in a twinkling of an eye, and we will just be in his presence. And that'll be that. So we do have a mandate, really, as thinking women, to make sure that we have that on our minds. That as we're going through, it doesn't matter how old you are. Like, I look at these beautiful girls here that are younger, and I think, wow, you have so much more life left to give, but how valuable that is. When I was that age, I was not paying attention, and I lost some years. And then when I finally had enough, or the Lord at his appointed time, he brought me into the church, and I was in, and I never left. I never left. So the earlier you get in, the better. And that's why we want to raise our kids, even though we're struggling sometimes in the messy middle. So have you ever gone on a road trip you thought was never going to end? We kind of talked about that. And maybe you're going through one right now. Maybe you're on a virtual road trip, and it's difficult, and you're struggling. For me, sometimes now it's the kids. Last year was different. This year, now I have to learn kind of how to work with them and how to mom these kids at this time in my life. Now, we all remember COVID because we're all, old enough to know. And COVID was like that. And people kind of dropped it. But I see a lot of folks wearing masks still. So for a lot of people, they're still in that place, right? So, but I got to thinking about COVID, and it was like a bad B movie. You ever watch those movies where you're like, are you kidding? Who paid for this, right? It was a bad B movie, and but we were all in it together, right? The isolation was treacherous, but our hunger for fellowship was stronger, and it drew us together. And Jean was talking about Calvary Chapel San Jose. That was one that stayed open all the time. It blew up. You go in there to have a women's Bible study at the table time or whatever, and you have a ring and a ring and a ring around the ring, and you say, okay, everyone, tell us your name and how you came to Calvary Chapel. And they all said COVID, 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 COVID. It was a terrible time, but look what it did. It brought people into churches where they could really hear the gospel. But it was difficult. Here's a selfie. I'd like, Michael, this is a selfie I took of my husband and I, okay, during COVID. Because you know what? You see me there. I was making the most of it. That is my husband, and he was dyeing my roots. And that's my favorite picture. I love it. But we can see that even in the messy middle, God can do a work in our lives. And that kept me going because I could look in the mirror and go, okay, I'm still here. Because when things started going down, you just didn't know what was going to happen to your hair. So that was, I love that photo. And then I really knew he loved me. So we've all got stories. You can take that down now. I just knew you wanted to see that. And you could go on my Facebook page and get their own copy if you like. So when you it's so professional. It was Apple iPhone. So anyway, that wasn't meant to be a plug. So we've all got stories, and some we've overcome, and there's some that we're working on now, right? Some pretty hard stuff. In Exodus, we pick up Moses' story as he leads the Israelites. Some of you guys, especially the Fremont gals, you guys know I have a fixation with Moses and the Red Sea and all of the things, the lessons that we can learn. I just love Moses. He leads the Israelites and a mixed multitude of rabble-rousers on a trip that's going to last them for 40 years. God took care of his people, and he forgave their sin and fed them manna from heaven. Now, I don't want to go too far into the backstory, but he took really good care of them. Sadly, the desires of the people were carnal, and their patience wore thin. So this is one guy, seemingly, against a whole multitude of people that all had an opinion that differed from God's. They were unthankful, and God patiently reminds them. The scripture, it says, Deuteronomy 29:4, and I have led you 40 years in the desert. Your clothes have not worn out on you, and your sandals have not worn out on your feet. We forget how much God is actually doing in our midst. We're going through things. It's hard. It's like being squeezed in a box. Some of this stuff is very difficult, but we can't let ourselves forget what God has done, what he did do. And so when we come to church or we read the scriptures, we're able to be reminded of how much God is already doing in our life. Tired of the squabbles and unbelief and rebellion, Moses seems to hit a wall in Psalm 90. I became obsessed with Psalm 90 when I realized that this was really after the children of Israel had, there's this whole story about how they didn't have faith and they didn't go into the promised land. And because they didn't trust God, they lost out. And imagine knowing that you did that and knowing this is somebody, if from a spiritual perspective, that now you have to go the rest of the way and you're not going to see the promised land. So, it could be very depressing. I wonder if there were those, we know there were ones that were angry, but I wonder if there were those that really caught the understanding there, the wisdom of God, and that said, you know what, you're right. We did exactly what you said we did. We deserve this punishment, but guess what? Maybe we can do something, no matter how small, to redeem the time that we have. Have you ever been so weary in well-doing that you wanted to quit? I have. But one thing I've learned, just over the years, you get older and you keep going, and we have been involved in ministry and we've seen miracles, and God never failed us yet. He has a way of just doing it and getting you through it. I don't care what it is. Even some of the best times were the worst of times, really, when I first just started saying, Lord, I need you. I came in, I was a big mess, but I stayed, and the Lord just opened doors for me, and I began to really understand my calling, all kinds of things. Can you imagine Moses' desperate cry to God for encouragement? And these are my words. Can I get a little help down here, Lord? Moses reveres God and his sovereignty, but I can't help wondering if he's thinking, is this all there is? My life's work, and I end up cut down. This is the scripture, cut down like a withered blade of grass. So I used to read I would go through the Psalms, and I'd get to Psalm 90, and I couldn't get through it because it was the most depressing, because that's the way I looked at it. I saw this like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is the worst, because it sounds like he's saying, what's the point? Why try? That's what I kept hearing. And I thought, I can't take that today. This is a rough day, and I need something that's going to help me. Well, this turned out to be one of my favorite Psalms in the world. So in Numbers 13, we find God instructing Moses to send spies to scout the land. Now, we kind of talked about this a little bit. God had already decided to give the land to the people. God had already made a plan that they were going to go into the land. And then um, uh, he wanted to give them baby steps to show the former slaves the blessing of freedom and challenges of character building. So much of what we want or we see, we like, I thought, God, you were going to do this. He's got this gap. He's got this little dash. He's got this gap between the promise of God, or it's an inkling that God wants to do something, and the character that he wants to build in you before he gives you that opportunity. The best things, get like fragrance out of anything is to break it so that the oils can come out. That's when you get the best fragrance, and that's what God's looking for. So God's plan for Moses to send the Caleb and Joshua into the promised land to go out with the spies to spy the land. They return with their cheeks full of grapes. It says in the Bible that the grapes were enormous, which is like, that could kind of do you in, I think. I don't know, but and they had more to share. Caleb encourages the people. God has thought about of everything, guys. He has provision. He's doing it. We're rough and tumble dudes. We can do this. Now, all we have to do is trust him and go take the land. Too late. Unbelief had already set in to the rest of the population. And I put in here like rigor mortis. When someone dies, they get stiff. And they don't do anything to move forward. Despite Joshua and Caleb's pleading, the Israelites chose to stay in their desert wandering. They did make a decision, even though maybe later some of them had second thoughts. That's what they wound up doing. But they did that rather than trust in God. So trusting in God, I think, is key here. So circling back to Psalms 99 through 11, you won't be surprised to find that Israel's unbelief and refusal to enter the promised land left Moses tasked with leading the Israel kicking and screaming through the desert. And that's how they finished their journey. Arguing, fighting, kicking, screaming, and doing all kinds of stuff. It was like putting out fires in the camps where they would hear about something happening over here and they had to go stop it. It was just a nightmare for Moses, and I kind of feel sorry for him. Moses was exasperated on many occasions. He did a couple things that he shouldn't have done, but his heart was right. The Bible tells us that he was the meekest man who ever lived. And I think that was because God humbled him back in the day when he killed someone out of anger, and then he was set aside in the desert. He spent 40 years in the desert on his own, and God spoke to him at that time. What could Moses do and say that he would get the people out of their own way? I want to ask you, have you ever been in your own way and then figured it out, broke free of that, and then moved forward and really learned something? If you have something to share. You have a story to tell. Are you in your own way right now? And you can sort of feel it. You've got pride, you're sticking to it, I deserve to be mad still, or whatever it may be. I would ask you to consider praying about that and asking the Lord if he would help you get over yourself. It is clear the consequences of Israel's unbelief cost them more than they bargained for. They didn't know. My kids, when they're being bratty and they're doing things, like recently there was a thing that came up, and all they had to do was tell the truth. All they had to do was say they were sorry. And weeks went by. Weeks went by. And as parents, you're like, okay, I'm so tired of being mad, and let's just forgive them. Let's just forgive them because I can't take this anymore. Why are we the ones, right, that are worried about it? So the Israelites just didn't seem to get what was happening. Um, in spite of the fact that it cost them more than they bargained for, I can't deny hoping that many regretted their sin and gave way at last to God's sovereignty. Now, I read in the scriptures that they wandered through the desert, and I just assumed they were all ticked off because they weren't going to get to the promised land, and they were just jaded. Who would not be after that long, right? But I am an optimist, and I don't know this to be true, but out of that many people, I would think at least somebody went, you know what? He was right. And face the music. We won't be able to go into the promised land, but you know what? You go, girl. Because why wouldn't someone in that group? I just feel like that would be a hopeful thing to me for somebody to admit it. Let's just admit it. In Psalms 90, 7 through 11, it says, I think this might be too many verses here, but Psalm 97, it says, for all our days, this is the one that always kind of took me out, and I read this and I felt depressed. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives, remember that old soap opera, The Days of Our Lives? I'm pretty sure that's where that came from. I just had to say that in case, because we know the days of our lives. Okay, all right, so let me start over. For all our days have passed away in your wrath. We finish our years like a sigh. The days of our lives are 70 years, and if by reason of strength, they are 80 years. Yet their boast is only labor and sorrow, for it is soon cut off, and we fly away. Who knows the power of your anger? For as the fear of you, so is your wrath. So when I would read that, I would just feel like this is just really, really harsh. But lengthy trials reveal what we are made of. And more importantly, they help us discover who we are when no one's watching. So, and I think that's a big deal. Who are you when no one's watching? All of us have a really dark side, if we're honest. We get angry, we mutter to ourselves, we do whatever. But when we are dedicated to God, and to me, God's word, to read the word, to sit in church, I'm going to ask a showing of hands. How many of you have been in such a snit before church that even the ride, even the ride to church wasn't long enough? So, okay, I got this many hands. When I got to church, I was like, I cannot look at him. And I know this is wrong. I know this is wrong. So then the music comes, and I'm like, oh, I was flooded. I'm like, I'm so sorry, Lord. I'm so sorry. How many marriages were saved because those individuals went to church with their man, even though they were mad? And then they just said, you know what? I forgive you. And the reason we can do it is because we know deep down, if we're, when God puts that little finger on, we know we're jerks. We know even if we're right, you could start out in the right and end up in the wrong just by your attitude. And the Bible tells us to win our husbands without a word. And so you just go, wow, how do you do that? How do you live 40 years with a guy that doesn't love God, who does his thing? Well, there's a certain point in time when he needs you. And he looks at you and he goes, ah, and it breaks his heart. You stayed. Nobody else's did. They got all these guys, they're on their third marriage. You stayed, and it's a beautiful thing. Who you are when no one's watching. The prophet Moses found himself at ground zero of a 40-year trial that tested his patience and the people God called him to serve. Now that's tough. I think that Moses, boy, oh boy, he had probably the hardest job. I don't know. I mean, Elijah had there was a lot of them, I guess. There's a lot of them. All the prophets I would not have wanted to be. Moses knew going in that God's children were a rebellious lot. He knew. But guess what? So was Moses. When he grew up and then he was in the house of Pharaoh, and he went out and he saw what they were doing to his people, the Jews, and he said, this isn't right, and he got in trouble. But Moses was not a perfect man at all. It took him 40 years in the desert to get that out of him. And then the Bible says that he was the most humble of men. He didn't start out that way. He thought he was going to just rule the roost, I think, because he saw things and he had the right idea about what was just and unjust. But God had to take him away to show him how sheep need to be tended for him to be able to do what he did. I suspect Moses himself knew a bit about being hard-headed. I already put that down. I'm smarter than myself. Okay. Though Moses could not change the Hebrews' stubborn hearts, he encouraged them to consider the brevity of their life. Sometimes when we're dealing with people, we're attacking what they did and but what if we take time to just ask people to consider something else? It's a good way to make peace. Moses intercedes for his people in Psalm 90:12, asking the Father for compassion and mercy on the children of men so they might find joy and purpose in their journey. I love this because Moses was broken in the desert. And he's got these people who, by all rights, he'd just take them and kind of knock their heads together. But instead, he has compassion for them. He's watching how hard it is for them and how wound up they are. And there was nothing that he could do. So he asked God for mercy so that they could find joy and purpose in their journey. Imagine, I always thought, just picture them walking and then until they fall over one at a time. They all die. And it's all just a big mess. But what if something happened during that time, in that journey? And I suggested that maybe some people humbled themselves. I suggest that there had to have been at least one who did. And so these people, he wanted them to say, well, okay, so we're here. But how can we make the best of it? So he intercedes for the people. But Moses was desperate for their lives to count and for his life as their leader to count for eternity. There's times in our lives when we go through a long season of just dryness. And sometimes it could be because something happened to you in your life. But I think this happens to us. A lot of us are in a similar age where you just go, wow, we used to do that. I remember that. That's how that used to be. It's like Jean talking about the old days, when the hippie days, and everybody was getting saved every 5 minutes, and they didn't even know what they were doing. And they were like, somebody, I forget what her name was in line, and it was like, oh, so we're going to pray for her. She didn't know why she was in line. And it was Macintosh. She didn't know why she was in line, but everybody else was in line. So she got in line and got baptized. And I think she came out of the water saved speaking in tongues. And it was like, oh, okay. Anybody got a towel? They didn't know what they were doing. But this, I'm just thinking that God did a work, I believe, among the children of Israel, even when they were in the desert. I really believe that because that's his character. I believe that's his character. Moses cries out to God to fill them with purpose and reveal himself so they might live victoriously in the final act of their lives. And this is kind of where I'm going. I feel like I look at myself in the mirror and I just try to keep myself up so I can cheer myself up. But I'm shocked when I look at the number on I'll be 66 on my birthday in October. And so we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but it's like, whoa, when did that happen? I'm glad I knew Jesus all in between. I really am. And Moses is saying, give us joy, Lord. And this is me paraphrasing. Show us your glory again so our children will learn from our mistakes and know your greatness. Are you in a place right now in your life or in your Christian walk where you feel like you're just flatlined? We've all been there. And a lot of times, like during COVID, a lot of people quit going to church. And they got we sat there and we tried so hard. We had our kids and we had them doing communion for us because, we wanted them to participate. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same as being in the body. And I was so glad when it all changed. Moses says, paraphrase, let your beauty shine on us again so we can bring glory to your name. Give us revival. Give us revival, Lord. That's what we need. Have you ever been through a trial you thought would never end? I expect you have in one time or another. I know I have. How did it go? And what did you learn from the process? For me, I learned to turn to God even more. I started writing. I started looking at not what I couldn't do, but what I could do. And it made all the difference in my life. Moses' road trip through the desert with the children of Israel took decades longer than God had intended it to be. They were supposed to go to the promised land. God had it all planned out. And the spies went out, they came back with tons and tons of fruit, chomping their way through their grapes and doing all this stuff. And in one afternoon, they blew it. They chose not to trust God and they stopped. And it changed their lives. I wonder, is there any of us that are in a situation right now where we are refusing to step into the next place that God wants us to step into? A lot of times it's forgiveness. That's a biggie because sometimes we've truly been wounded and very deeply. But did you know that you can forgive even when someone isn't sorry? And God will show you how to do that. And you forgive others because God forgave you. And if you sat down and jotted it out, you'd think, wow, you know what? You're right. You are right. Forgiveness is huge. Otherwise you just stay in that desert. So what did you learn from the process? Moses' road trip through the desert with the children of Israel took decades longer than God intended it to. Why? In a nutshell, the people had a fatal bent towards unbelief. God knew his kids would grumble and complain against Moses, so he gave Moses immense patience. He was the most patient man that ever lived. Here he's the murderer guy, but he somehow was gifted. God saw the Israelites still in horrible ways, sin in horrible ways. So he gave the 10 Commandments for their instruction. And you know he had to do that twice because they broke them. That always was kind of... God wanted the mixed multitude to know that he could rely on him. So he gave them manna every morning. All were welcome at his table. So even while the children of Israel were in time out, he was still feeding them. He was still taking care of them. They still had an opportunity to be thankful. You think about it. God's desire for the first string of Israelite sojourners was to see them enter the promised land. When they refused, their hearts hardened, they lost their blessing, and their fate was sealed. Unfortunately, those who experienced crossing the Red Sea on dry ground would remain. These are the same ones who had gotten rescued from Pharaoh and all of that, would remain in a state of unbelief for 40 years, never knowing the freedom God had for them on the other side. Now, this, I still would hope that there were those, because there was Joshua and there was Moses as well that were believers. Moses interceded for God's people many times over the 40 years of wandering. And all that time, he never failed to ask for mercy on their behalf. Do you know someone that's like this and that you've kind of just had it with them? Sometimes we want to give up. There's a certain point in time. It happens with marriages, and that you've gone and gone and gone and gone, and now you're just like done. But in this we see that Moses never stopped interceding. He never stopped. And that was good for his heart. In the end, Moses asked the maker of heaven and earth to establish the work of their hands. Okay, then. Give us something to do that will be helpful, and that we'll be proud about. This is my little brain working here, but in the end, Moses asked the maker of heaven and earth to establish the work of their hands, to help a guy out so God's people can leave their handprint in the concrete of his story, an indelible mark saying, Kimberly was here. And that's what we want. At some point, we are going to go be with the Lord. And if you put your handprint, I love that whole idea, saying Kim was here. When I read Psalm 90, I just always read, it's like, wow, all this, and you just kick the bucket, and that's all there is? Well, put your handprint in. Do something. Raise your grandbabies. Serve at school. Be a witness. Be a Bible study leader. Go to Bible study. It'll bless you. Let your work appear, he says, to your servant, and your glory to their children, and let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of your hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So here he is talking about these people, and he says, let the beauty of the Lord be upon us, and establish the work of their hands. They still had opportunity to get something done, even in the desert. Israel's problem was that they did not believe in God. Sorry, I want to make sure I'm not. When do they kick me out? At noon? Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. The real problem, the one that cost him the promised land, was the refusal to believe God for the future. Don't allow yourself to be jaded right now for the future that God has for you. It might be different than you're expecting, but don't let yourself be jaded. Just keep praising him and asking him what he wants you to do. The Bible is replete with stories of faith and failure in the lives of everyday people just like you and me. Psalm 90 in its entirety teaches us that life is hard, but God is for us. God will take us through the desert to reveal his beauty in the dry places. he teaches us that we add nothing to the number of our years, but to boast of our labor and sorrow. So we ask, why are we here, God? What do you want from me? That should be, and then it says, I'll be closing in just a minute, but what should we be doing then in our 70, and if we're blessed, 80 years? The scripture says in this psalm that was something that Moses said, that we have these, he said 70, and if we're lucky, 80 years, what should we be doing? So he was counting those years. That's a little nerve-wracking to me, because as I studied and I'm like, shoot, I'm starting to get up there for sure. Lord, teach us to number our days. Show us how. Help us make every day count. Give us joy, Lord, because many of us have lost our joy. At different times, we lose it because maybe a loved one passed. There's different times, but God wants us to have joy in him no matter what. The older I get, the more I realize that it's more about God and not what I have made it. Living in these last days is not just about having a full life, family and kids, and a decent retirement. I say, ha ha ha. Sure, I might have a life saved, but how much time is wasted? So I wanted to tell you, so we defined wisdom. We went on Google to find out what wisdom meant. And it said, knowing, having discernment to apply the truth. So it's a verb, the way that they put it, right? This is an action you will take if you're wise. Knowing the right time, the right way, the right motive. These definitions may be true, but for me, wisdom is about being ready and not wasting the time that I have. So I want to show you something. It was precarious. Okay, so this right here has 13 marbles in it. Isn't this cute? 13 marbles. My daughters are 13, or actually they're 12, but they'll be 13 in January. They'll always tell you. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. There's 13 marbles in here, and if this is their lifespan, this is how much time they have to change the world for Christ and for whatever they do, whatever they choose to do. It fills up fast, doesn't it? I'm shocked at how fast it fills up. So this is my daughters at 13. This is me at 65. I'm having a birthday in October. I debated about putting that other marble in, and I didn't. I was like, no, I should. I'm holding my own right now. But that's not much. But I am grateful for this much. I truly am grateful. My mom is 80, she'll be 87, or no, 86, coming up. And she's in a facility. She's lost her ability to do a lot of things, but she's funny and she forgot to be mad. And that is the best way to see my mom, okay? God does things in ways that we wouldn't expect, but when we go, we do nothing but laugh and play, and she loves to play. Like a little kid, we use the little animals and stuff, and she sings, and she can, when we start to play, my sister plays guitar, and she'll play and sing something, and Mom knows those words. And on occasion, she'll harmonize. So it's a big deal, but that's Mom's journey. And she is making the most of it because, boy, she's no one to mess with no matter what. So that's where I'm at. This. Now, remember it said whether you get 70 or 80 years, whatever. This is, I had to shove the marbles in. This is an 80-year-old that's got all the goods. The wisdom, the grace. 80 to me, it starts, those numbers start looking less daunting. You're like, well, she's only 80. So my mom is, she's up there. So she's past that, and she's got a life to live, and she's giving joy to us. She gives joy to my sister who comes, right? So, but this is the back in this day. It was like, we'll give you 70. Ah, okay, all right, all right. Everybody looked sad. Okay, all right, I'll give you 80. Okay, I don't know when God's going to take us home. We look forward to the rapture. We hope he comes in that way. But the bottom line is, God's kindness shows us how to count to eternity, one marble at a time. So we don't know how soon we'll go or how long we'll stay. But if you put it in a year, but just like he shows us how to count eternity, one marble at a time. This is nothing compared to eternity. These are just the years. But eternity is where we're headed, making every single day count. Every single day count. Tell God you want to make good on the days that you're given. That's what we need to do. We need to pray, and we need to tell God that we want to make good on the days we're given. So often you get sad and you're like, wow, what's the point? What's the use? You let yourself go, lady. And it's really, really easy to do, especially like COVID, that other it's like, but you know what? Don't do it. If you can breathe and you can move, or you can ask someone to help you breathe and move, then do it. Let's do it. Let's find and look around, and you maybe you can't do what you used to do, but you can do things now that you didn't used to do because you had other things to do. And I think that's really worth something. Before my mom got where she was bedridden, she had cats, and she just loved it. She loved to nurture and care for things. And she would just go into everybody's room and just bend over and go, hi, like, how are you doing? Like, she was talking to someone much younger, and she was going to be, the light for that person. It was amazing. She used to go into one of the rooms where there was a lady in the bed who was steadfast. She was on hospice, and she did not have any signs of cognizant reasoning or any of it. And mom thought she was a baby because she was teeny and she was curled up. So mom would, I said that I was alarmed because she kept going in that room and tucking the lady in and doing all that stuff. And I asked the staff, and they said, oh no, we just watch from the door and let her do her thing, because my mom is a nurturer, and she was going to make that baby as comfortable as she could. So who's to say? And that makes us really look at what value do we have? Even in the smallest ways. Writing notes. If you can't get around, you can write notes. I know some people who write notes to every prisoner. There's a federal prison in Florida, where I don't know if you guys, do you guys know Carol Kent by chance? Does anybody remember Carol Kent? Well, she was always a well-known Bible teacher, and she was just really famous back in the 90s. And then her son murdered the ex-husband of his wife because he was a child molester, and they were giving him custody to be able to take the babies home to his house. So her son killed that individual. And now he's in prison, and she goes to the prison, and they ended up they have all this ministry that they do there. They made the most of what they had. Her heart is broken. Every 5 years she tries to get him out, and every 5 years they say no. But the son just became like a chaplain in the place. And so and it's kind of a weird thing to bring up on that tone, but the fact is that there's something you can do wherever you are. And there's a way to frame the pain and the hurt or betrayal, things that you can't do anything about now, but that God can give you a way to sort through that, to find a way that you don't have to live in pain. You don't have to live like these guys, grumbling and griping and carrying on for the rest of your life over something. And it might just be one thing that's stuck in your craw. But it's good to consider just letting it go. And that you would look at that dash in your life and what would you want them to say of you? I had a couple of them, my one-liners. One was, Mom had really good taste. That was one of them. And another one was, I told my husband when he died, I was going to put, I stand corrected on his. Now, I won't really do that because I don't think they'd let me. But anyway, so that's pretty much what I have to share here. But I just hope that you guys will, just take the message that I give, and maybe it touched you in some way, and there's an area of your life. I would venture to guess that every single one of us has something that we need to deal with. And let's do it. Let's just give it to God and stop torturing ourselves. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to pray. Father, I just thank you for these ladies who have been kind enough to be attentive and to me and to kind of look inside my head. And Father, I know that each one of us has been through things that are difficult, and that the times we live in, it just feels like every single day we are getting a new wave of these things to where you can't even remember what your last thought was. I struggle a lot. Your word tells us this was going to happen, that it would increase in the last days. Father, help us to go back to the simple things like Jean talked about, and the times when kids just were tired of being sick and tired and they got saved. If there's anyone in this room who doesn't know you, who came as a guest and isn't sure exactly what that all means, but their heart strings are being tugged today, I just pray that you would reach in there and speak to that individual, that you would just shine, you would shine, that you would show that you have grace enough to heal the brokenhearted and to give strength to someone who's weak. Lord, we praise your holy name. We thank you for these wonderful ladies. And we just ask that you would take these lessons that we're talking about and learning, that you would take those with us when we go. And that we would not lose our marbles, but use them for your glory. Amen.